People get so concerned with grading nowadays that kata has become something to master in order to grade, rather than something to master for combative purposes or to develop self-mastery or mastery over your body. There is a famous saying by Matsuo Basho: "Don't follow in the footsteps of old men, but rather seek what they sought." So when you're performing Tegyoku Shodan or Saifa or Seiyunshin, try not to just think of it as a series of movements to perfect, but rather ask yourself, what skill sets is this instilling in me? Or how is this teaching me to use my body? I bring this up at Sepai for a reason. I read that the average time it takes a student in Gokan-Ryu to reach black belt is 5 to 6 years. That means after all that time, all those bumps and bruises and sore muscles, all those times they went to training even when they didn't feel like it, all those times that they felt they weren't improving and yet continued to go, all those times where they had distractions, busy periods at work or school exams. After all those hurdles, they finally find themselves just one grade away from black belt. And that's when they're introduced to Sepai, one of the most difficult kata to learn in all of karate. So with all that, it's easy to find yourself developing a tunnel vision and see Sepai as a series of movements that you must become adequate enough in order to pass a black belt grading. And that's perfectly fine. I say this is perfectly fine because there's a saying in karate: white belt is the beginning of technique and black belt is the beginning of understanding. So when you reach your black belt, you can start your journey all over again, full circle, with new eyes and a fresh perspective and a deeper understanding. You can start then to look at your kata more closely. You can start to ask yourself, do I really know Saifa? Do I really know Basadai? Do I really know Sepai? Because as the saying goes, to know and not do is to not really know. So you may be asking, how does one implement Sepai into their karate or even combat? Sepai is known for countless senjutsu, but one stands out above all others, and that is the use of pivoting. There are countless times throughout the kata where we're regularly shifting and pivoting on the spot. Now this is very different to the other kata that we've had from Naha to date. Even to give a very brief recap, Saifa, it is constantly us that is moving to avoid toe-to-toe confrontation. Seiyunshin, we stand strong and our goal is to turn our opponent to avoid toe-to-toe confrontation. Sansaru, being of the Sanshin kata family, we're constantly trying to push our opponent back onto their heels, or again, slight pivoting. But Sepai, again, we avoid our toe-to-toe confrontation through the constant use of this pivoting. Now in grappling this is effective, but also even in kumite.
As Shihan Stacy Koretzian goes through the entire kata very loosely, notice the constant use of pivoting. While this may appear loose or even sloppy, it's actually excellent practice, as it's training us to move fluently through the kata, therefore better equipping us to use Sepai's senjutsu in various forms of combat. If we only ever practice our kata as though we are being assessed on each individual technique, we will no doubt develop a great aesthetic kata, but we will struggle to bridge the gap between kata and combat. Training at the Budokan, Shihan and I are going through cooperative or randori kumite drills, using Sepai's senjutsu of pivoting as an attack. This allows us to protect our T-line, essentially the vulnerable areas of the body, by turning side on to our opponent, even getting in behind our opponent, essentially toe to rear combat. Taking this section of the kata, we're now about to perform some bunkai applications using this pivoting senjutsu. Kata was never designed to defend against karate techniques such as straight kicks and punches, but it's often a place where people start their bunkai journey. Kata was designed to take on habitual acts of violence, essentially any technique the common thug might use. This includes your basic lapel grabs, headbutts, wild swinging punches, knee strikes, tackle into the ground, and numerous others. As Hironori Otsuka said, Kata must be trained and practiced sufficiently, but one must not become stuck in them. As each situation may vary, we must be able to adapt and modify the kata to suit. But while the techniques may change, the senjutsu remain the same. Once again, we start off our application against a basic karate technique. Working now at close quarter, Shihan is distracting me by striking to vulnerable areas before attempting to apply the senjutsu. A healthy ideology to have is that any kata technique can be applied against any habitual act of violence. In this example, Shihan is using his left arm to pin my grabbing arm to him, and then his right arm to lever back my chin. Adapting this to strikes, the left arm becomes a block, and the right hand attacks the rear shoulder. This prevents a follow-up punch. Shihan is now adding the next move of the kata. In this instance, he's using his Shkodach sumo stance as a takedown. This section of the kata occurs close to the end, and once again you see the pivoting on and off. To begin, we're sticking very close to the actual movements in the kata. Shihan must now adapt his blocks as the angles of the punches have changed. Note now that Shihan is intercepting earlier. What would have been the final uchiuke is now a palm strike to the face. Once again, he's intercepting earlier, this time after just 2 attacks. It's a quick pivot off and pivot back on. These are effective combat drills using Sepai's senjutsu of pivoting off and on. As Choki Matobu once said, learn to apply the principles of the katas such that you can bend with the winds of adversity. Once again, Shihan is intercepting earlier and earlier in the piece, this time after just 1 attack. It should go without saying that while kicks in kata are generally above the belt, during real combat, our goal is to aim at anatomical weak points. So our story of Sepai draws to a close, and while it was only brief, we hope that it inspires you to do your own research into not only the history of the kata, but the fighting concepts behind it. But beyond research, don't forget that you too can come up with your own ideas about the principles within the kata. If you've been practicing a kata long enough, you are no doubt equipped to look into it and discover things for yourself.